Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, a campaign of hatred, how Palestinian religious leaders are using sermons to call for genocide against the Jews. We're going to hear what they're saying and bring you the story from Jerusalem. The growing divide between the U.S. and Europe as Vice-President J.D. Vance criticized European leaders for attacking free speech. And voters in Germany pushed back against the economic crisis and the open border crisis. Here at home, the nation's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, is in crisis, dealing with financial problems at some clinics, botched abortions, and more. And the massive religious shift in Brazil as evangelical Christianity is spreading rapidly and reshaping the country's spiritual and social landscape. We're going to have that story from Rio de Janeiro. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Got a lot to get to on this Tuesday. I want to begin in the Middle East, where talks for the next stage of the hostage release deal are underway. And even as that's happening, Hamas is preparing for war again, if necessary, including mobilizing thousands of terrorists, according to Widenet News. And even as negotiations continue for long-term solutions in Gaza, Palestinian clerics are leading a campaign of hatred. Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem. They're using sermons to call for genocide against the Jews.
In a Friday exhortation from Ramallah, senior judiciary official Dr. Abdullah Harb prayed for the extermination of all Jews. Itamar Marcus, founder of Palestinian Media Watch, tells CBN News his organization has discovered a trend in Palestinian Authority messaging.
5 times in probably the last 6 months, we've heard the expression, count the Jews, Allah, count the Jews one by one, kill them one by one, don't leave even one.
And these prayers come from top Islamic officials.
Some of them are Sharia judges, some of them are heads of the Sharia courts. These are very senior people in the religious establishment.
Marcus adds these sermons carry added weight, given the religious connection.
When you are telling people that they have to kill Jews because this is what their God wants, then you can't argue with them, you can't discuss with them, you can't reason with them, because they believe that this is fulfillment of Islam for them. And that's why it's such a difficult situation Israel is in.
This so-called fulfillment also led to widespread celebrations on October 7th.
And that's why the film showed the Palestinians from Gaza celebrating and so happy while they were murdering Jews, because they believed they were doing something for God.
When the world hears students and protesters chant from the river to the sea, many argue that's specifically about the Palestinians' right to the land. Marcus disagrees.
People like to believe that the Palestinians have a problem with Israel over territory, but when you listen to the leadership, and especially the religious leadership, you find that the Jews are the source of evil in the world. They teach that Israel was only created because the Europeans in particular had to get rid of the Jews. The ultimate solution is Allah will bring about destruction of all the Jews, and then the world will be a much better place. This is Palestinian Authority ideology.
Many of these protests in streets and capitals all over, they're calling Israel, that Israel is committing genocide. How do you compare the two?
There's nothing to compare. Israel is trying to kill terrorists. The terrorists are hiding behind civilians. German civilians were killed all the time because there were soldiers amongst them. Nobody said that the Allies had to send in water and food for the German civilians while Germany was being destroyed by the Allies. Absolutely not. But here they have a different standard for Israel.
U.S. taxpayers have paid more than $16 billion to fund the Palestinians since the year 2000, not including money for UNRWA, the United Nations Work and Relief Agency. The European Union's combined contributions total $23 billion from 2007 to 2023. Critics call this nothing more than direct support of terrorism.
The Palestinian Authority should be designated today as a terror organization, should be sanctioned as a terror organization, and don't allow them to visit your country and don't give them a penny.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Turn now to Europe. More evidence of people turning against their government in populist uprising as voters in Germany, upset over an economic crisis and an open border policy, gave the right-wing party Alternative for Germany second place in national election Sunday behind the Conservatives. Those elections coming after Vice-President J.D. Vance's recent address to NATO allies highlighted a growing gap between the U.S. and Europe. Vance scolded the leaders for trampling on free speech, as well as ignoring voters who are turning to parties on the right in growing numbers. Dale Hurt has the story.
It was clear from Vice President J.D. Vance's speech to NATO allies in Munich that at least politically, Western Europe and the United States under Donald Trump are moving away from each other. Vance took leaders to task over the rampant state-supported censorship in many European nations.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values.
And while Vance simply defended free speech, at least some of the liberal European elites in his audience saw him as giving aid and comfort to their political enemies on the European right. Those parties are becoming a major force. Vance addressed the issue of European elites trying to keep right-wing parties out of power.
We shouldn't be afraid of our people even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you.
A seismic political shift to the right was already underway in many Western democracies. Now, with the election of Donald Trump, the movement has become even more energized. What one European leader calls the Trump tornado has struck Europe.
They've been shaken up by the election of Trump. They really feel that, they're next.
Frank Ferretti is executive director of the think tank MCC Brussels.
I think there is a growing sense that the old mainstream parties have lost the trust and the connection with the public.
Many British and Europeans feel they have become poorer and less free. Eurozone growth has stagnated under climate change regulations from Brussels, and the average EU nation would now qualify as one of the poorest states in the U.S. Germany, once among the world's strongest economies, is now deindustrializing to meet radical green energy goals, what the Wall Street Journal calls the world's dumbest energy policy. German economist and journalist Sabine Beppler-Spall says Germans see their falling standard of living and want a leader who will do something about it.
There is a very strong mood within a large sector of German population for very fundamental changes, for real changes.
If Trump's term is successful and Europe falls even farther behind the U.S. economically, it will only put more pressure on European elites trying to keep right-wing parties out of power. Dale Hurt, CBN News.
Coming up here at home, Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, is in crisis, dealing with botched abortions, clinics facing financial problems, and more. We've got the story for you when we come back. A bombshell report describes the abortion giant Planned Parenthood as in crisis. A New York Times article citing botched abortions, failed procedures, and undertrained staff as clinics struggle financially. As Charlene Aaron reports, the revelations reflect what pro-lifers have been saying for years.
The report comes as Planned Parenthood clinics across the country are shutting down and facing a slew of lawsuits. Many say the future of the nation's leading abortion provider looks more uncertain than ever. The New York Times article highlights a number of complaints against Planned Parenthood, including the story of a woman who filed a malpractice suit after her experience at a clinic in Albany, New York. After undergoing a procedure for an abortion, she left, but later returned after experiencing severe pain. The clinic told her nothing was wrong and sent her back home. 12 weeks later, she delivered a baby that was alive, but later died. Such stories come as no surprise to those in the pro-life movement.
This is how Planned Parenthood has run many of its businesses for years. And for those of us who are deep in the pro-life movement, we've seen this.
Many point to financial corruption as well. In 2022, Planned Parenthood received $498 million in donations, but according to the Times, little of it goes towards health care. For years, pro-lifers have called for an end to taxpayer funding of the organization. The Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission is renewing that push, urging Congress to defund the group under the new Trump administration. The American people should not be forced to subsidize an organization that profits from the deaths of innocent lives, reads a letter on the group's website. Katie Glenn Daniels of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America agrees.
They've shown that they are not good stewards of our money. And there are millions of pro-life Americans and even millions of pro-choice Americans who say, I don't want my taxpayer money going to pay for abortions.
The report also listed high turnover at Planned Parenthood clinics, lack of proper training for staff, and clinics in desperate need of upgrades and repairs. With a number of clinics closing, lawsuits piling up, and several states cutting Medicaid funding, some say Planned Parenthood may be losing its grip on the abortion industry.
The writing should be on the wall. They receive $700 million in taxpayer funds. Planned Parenthood shouldn't be receiving a single dime in taxpayer funds. They are a corrupt abortion chain that should be shut down instead.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Still ahead, in a nation that is crazy about soccer, millions of Christians are packing out the largest football stadium for nights of worship as Jesus is breaking records. CBN News traveled to Brazil for a first-hand look at the revival spreading across the country. We're going to bring you the story right after this.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning. Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Plus, get exclusive stories and daily scripture encouragement just for you. Stay informed. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
In South America, Brazil is witnessing a seismic shift in its religious landscape. The rapid spread of evangelical Christianity is reshaping the country's spiritual and social fabric. In fact, evangelicals are poised to outnumber Catholics as the largest faith group there. George Thomas brings us the story from Rio de Janeiro.
In the heart of Brazil, amidst the rhythmic beats of samba and the vibrant colors of Carnival, something spiritually profound is unfolding.
We are on the verge of a religious change in Brazil.
Sociologist Jose Alves tells CBN News that if there's one image that symbolizes Catholicism's influence here, it's Rio de Janeiro's 98-foot-tall Christ the Redeemer. Inaugurated in 1931, the iconic statue celebrated the country's rich Catholic heritage. 94 years later, Alves says the faith's dominance is rapidly declining.
In 1950, 93% of Brazilians identified as Catholics. The church was losing about 1% of followers every decade. However, from 1991 onwards, the Catholic Church started to lose 1% of followers every year, resulting in a dramatic drop.
Evangelical Christianity, once a minority faith here, is now growing at unprecedented levels.
What you're looking at there on your screen is this beautiful blue structure known as the Cathedral of Brasilia. It is one of the largest Catholic churches here in Brazil's capital city. The surveys show that what was once the world's largest Catholic nation will by 2030 be overwhelmingly evangelical.
Signs of this growth are everywhere. Megachurches dotting the landscape, filled with thousands of worshippers each week. From Andrea Fernandez's church in Sao Paulo,
we are living in the fulfillment of a promise. For many decades, we have heard that Brazil would experience a wave of revival that would be exported around the world. And I believe that this is what we are experiencing at this moment.
To Lurival Pereira's congregation in the Amazon region, boasting more than 10,000 members across some 600 cell groups.
The foundation of our growth is these cells. The real revival is taking place outside the church walls. Every day, people are meeting in small groups in homes. It's the biblical model.
To J.B. Carvalho's church in the capital city of Brasilia.
We started the church in 2003 with only 25 people. Today, we have about 12,000 people in Brasilia alone. We also have another 15,000 people in Fortaleza. Our churches are spread throughout Brazil.
To Silas Malafais's church in Rio de Janeiro, one of the largest and most influential Pentecostal churches in Brazil, with more than 100,000 members.
In the next 7 years or so, we will be the majority in the country. Today, we make up about 35% of the population, and God's kingdom has influence in every corner of Brazilian society.
Marcelo Crivella, a well-known evangelical pastor turned politician, once served as mayor of Rio de Janeiro. He says that years ago, evangelical Christians hesitated to get involved in politics, but that's no longer the case. More than 30% of the country's legislators are now evangelical.
We are more than 140 deputies and more than 20 senators.
Many of them gather each Wednesday in the halls of Brazil's Congress for worship and prayer. The country's first evangelical church opened in 1922. By 1990, that number had grown to more than 7,000 congregations. Nearly 30 years later, it grew to over 109,000. The growth so staggering that one study found 17 new evangelical churches opening every day across Brazil.
Now in Brazil, 550,000 churches.
As Anette Rodriguez says, this dramatic transformation began, as in many great movements, with the most profound of practices, prayer.
I've always believed that prayer is like planting. You plant, 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 and at some point it will sprout, and then the explosion will come.
Those who have been tracking the explosive growth of the evangelical movement here in Brazil say worship has played a monumental role in the church's growth. And one Christian artist, above all, has been at the center of it all. Her name is Ana Paula Valadão.
Even growing up, I had glimpses of crowds, of multitudes worshiping the Lord.
From the late 1990s to the early 2000s, her group's music became synonymous with a powerful worship movement that emphasized intimacy with God, passionate worship, and personal revival.
As I was songwriting, the Lord always made me very intentional. And the whole idea was about transformation, was about changing the nations.
She held concerts in strategic locations, drawing millions of people, many of whom were Catholics.
Like the carnival site in Rio de Janeiro, and we filled every soccer stadium in this nation. Jesus broke every record, gathering more people than any soccer tournament.
Because of her songs, many Catholic services in Brazil today, like one CBN News attended in Sao Paulo, have embraced a more evangelistic style of worship, shifting away from traditional liturgies to incorporate contemporary music. Father Antonio Luis Ferreira, who leads the Cathedral of São Sebastião in Rio de Janeiro, says the change is part of an effort to encourage former Catholics to come home.
People are attracted to environments where worship celebrations and moments of prayer are done in a more charismatic way. Today, a growing number of Catholics are returning precisely because prayer meetings are conducted in a more Pentecostal style.
Still, for Brazil's Catholic majority, the question is no longer whether they will lose their dominance, but how quickly. The answer? Probably faster than anyone ever expected. George Thomas, CBN News, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Coming up, a journey through history in a British cathedral with gospel readings and a look at key events. We're going to bring you a look when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch.
The CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
I'm John Stolnis, host of the CBN News podcast, DC Debrief. Each Friday, get the inside scoop on Washington politics straight from the nation's capital. Because truth matters. Start listening today.
And finally today, St. Paul's Cathedral in London is taking visitors through centuries of the building's history with a display called Luminous. The show includes music, readings from the Gospel, and archival footage from World War II. The cathedral has been the site of major state events, including the wedding of King Charles to the late Princess Diana and the funerals of Prime Ministers Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher.
And I think when the audience comes in, we're going to introduce the cathedral to new people, and I think that's what makes this project really special, is having contemporary media here in the building, but continuing that art history.
The display also commemorates the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. Here's the message I hope you will post, tag, tweet, and share with those in your circles of influence. The hard thing that you're avoiding won't change until you face it, but time will keep moving, so you may want to get to work. Time is passing. It's not waiting for you, so you may not want to wait for it. With that word, I encourage you to make this a terrific Tuesday and don't waste time. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. Take a moment. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We'll see you tomorrow.